the part I sort of love most about your work is your teachings on the Lacanian perspective on language. So I kind of want to ask from you what the kind of the meta psychology of Lacan tells us about human subjectivity apropos language. And if I may, I want to read out a short excerpt from your book. Is that okay? Just on the topic of language. So
Uh-huh.
on page 215, you say the autistic subjects, in this case, there's no other as language for them. But then in the introduction, there's this really good excerpt that you give, which I love, to be honest. It says, yeah, according to Lacan, language precedes the existence of an individual in the sense that if it exists before he or she is born and subsists after his or her death. As Fink emphasizes in his book, The Lacanian Subject, before a child is born, he or she is already endowed with a name as well as assigned with a personality, all of which are imagined by his or her parents through their use of signifiers. These signifiers used to endow the child with an existence in language are not uniquely invented by the parents, but are acquired from a symbolic order that has been accumulating for centuries preceding his or her conception. This system of signifiers is governed by a set of laws and is determined by Lacan as the other of language. And I was thinking, if anyone needs kind of some kind of motivation to read more Lacan, this excerpt itself should be good enough, especially if you're interested in philosophy. So Leon, what does Lacan have to say about language, and why in particular is language so important, or I would say crucial, for Lacanian psychoanalysis?
Yes, it is language that is important, uh, and I'll just say it here. But it is the way that language impacts the body which is at stake. So we have to remember that. But let's get to it maybe when we continue. And I'll just try and say this commonsensically. There's a certain idea that we might simplify by saying that when we look at, let's say, or organisms like humans, we clearly notice that our existence has a certain continuity to it. Many philosophers try to think about this, and I think John Locke had a certain idea of sort of a string of consciousness. As long as the same consciousness remains there, so that I can say I was here 3 months ago, it's still me. Then we say, oh, there's a certain identity to this prolonged experience. But even prior to this question, in order to conceive of a certain continuation, a certain, let's say, relationship between what one experienced at point A and what one experiences today, we have to assume that something is, let's say, inscribed somewhere. I'll give you an example, a very simple one. Let's say a camera has a lens and has some film. Now, if we take out the film, the camera, the lens will still see the world. The photons will still go through it. So things will be, let's say, perceived in the world. But in order for there to be a memory or to have a certain testimony to that thing that happened, we need a film. We need something to be written. So language, for me, and I think for Lacan, it's this very essential thing. It is whatever is used to write, to inscribe. So in this sense, it is not the English language or the Farsi language or the Japanese language. It is whatever means one uses in order to inscribe something that remains. So it could be just something like this. We speak about it in many ways. Psychiatrists speak about it as sort of neuronal connections. It is a writing in the flesh. So this is language. Now, why language is so important for humans, and this is something that Lacan already says in his paper on the mirror stage, which is a very early paper. And he says, look, human beings are born underdeveloped. They're born half-baked. And you see it in comparison to other animals, some of which are born and just start roaming the world. If we speak about, I don't know, insects or lizards or stuff like that. But also mammals, you know, if you look at mammals, they are born, they can start walking, they can start sniffing, many of them. So when we think about the organism and sort of the hardwired level of the instinct, for many animals, these instincts are sufficient for them to exist in a world, in their world, from the moment of birth. But for humans, this is not the case. Our instincts, all the things that we are born with instinctually, are completely insufficient for our survival in the beginning. A baby cannot do anything, basically. And without the caretaker, there will not be any chance for survival. So, you know, we say that the baby is in the womb, let's say, the baby has a need and these needs are answered. But as soon as the baby is born, it might be hungry, it might be, I don't know, it might need a diaper change, but this does not happen automatically, immediately. So we say that after birth, there is necessarily a certain lack that is presented in the child's libidinal economy. Something is needed, but is not satisfied. Let's say mommy is at the toilet, daddy is not here, the child is hungry. Now, the child is not fed immediately. What the child has to do is to take on itself a certain representation that is linguistic and address it to another person. So this is the cry. So the baby cries, and then the parent starts to guess what is at stake, and then maybe the baby is fed. But what you see here is the fact that language is necessary in order to, let's say, compensate for this inherent inborn gap between the level of the instinct and the world for the human baby. Humans are born into a reality where our instincts and our, let's say, reality, our human reality, the humanized world, are in a complete separation. There's a schism. And the only way to connect them, to gain access to this world, is by addressing an other using a language that is not mine. This language is used to inscribe something in this gap between the instinctual level and the humanized world. And let's say this inscription and the way that language is used to inscribe is what we might identify in the clinic as a clinical structure. So everyone relies on language to attempt to compensate for an inherent gap, an inherent schism, an inherent split in every human's existence. And we use language in different ways in order to compensate for it. No one is able to bridge this gap. There is no one that, you know, lives in nirvana, sadly, you know, in a place where it is true. The inner world and the environment are in complete unicity. There is no such thing, only in our fantasies. So everyone uses language in a different way to do it. And what Freud was identifying, I think, in his beginning of his work is these particular ways that people use language in order to compensate. And he was saying, look at this. This is the neurotic way to compensate for this inherent schism in human existence. This is the psychotic way to compensate for this inherent schism. And what I argue in my book is that there is an autistic way to compensate for this inherent schism. I go to great lengths to describe it because I think it is very different from the neurotic and psychotic way. And I say that it is different to such an extent that it necessitates a different clinical approach. And this is why I say that autism is distinct, is a distinct structure, because I'm basically saying when we work with particular subjects that compensate for the schism using language in a particular way, we have to situate ourselves in the transference in a different